Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for Session 5 of AAMA's Mayor's Institute for Racial and Economic Justice Policy, titled Supporting Historically Black Colleges and Universities. I would like to thank our sponsor, PepsiCo, for their generous support of AAMA and this important event. Our newly launched Mayor's Institute is designed to support the training of elected mayors representing communities of 500 to over 1 million people to utilize information, training, and network connectivity to enhance their executive capacity for the benefit of their local citizens. We've put together an engaging set of speakers, sessions, and opportunities to connect with fellow mayors, business council partners, and special guests for the overall aim of providing best practices for robust leadership. Today's event will be moderated by Jamal Simmons. Mr. Simmons' career has focused on politics and media, innovation, economic connectivityness, and diversity for decades. Currently, he explores those themes as a political contributor for CBS News, opinion writer for The Hill, and the host of hashtag This Is FYI on Instagram and Facebook. Previously, Jamal advised corporate and foundation leaders for the Raven Group, where he was co-chair of the Internet Innovation Alliance. He also founded a digital media startup to bring together young creatives and entrepreneurs of color. Without further ado, I will now turn it over to Jamal Simmons. Mr. Simmons.
I want to thank AAMA for having me. This is it's always an honor to be involved with the African American Mayors Association. Jamie, who really helped put this whole thing together, and our dear friend Stephanie Mash Sykes, who was the longtime founding executive director. So I want to thank all of you all for having me be a part of this. I just want to open this up because I'm a Morehouse College grad. You know, I had to wear my swag for the show. So I'm a Morehouse College grad, and I have thought for a long time that HBCUs were a part of the critical infrastructure of America because there's no place that generates more leadership talent, more people who are able to take on the roles that really keep America going. I started my career in politics working for President Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton used to always say, there's nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed by what's right with America. And one of the things that is right with America are historical Black colleges and universities. I just want to give you one set of numbers before we get off into the program. Like I said, I went to Morehouse. Morehouse is about 2,200 students, graduate almost 400 African-American men every year in May. So those 400 Black men who go off into the world in medicine, law, teaching, politics, whatever it is. Texas A&M, which is one of the largest schools in the country, they graduate 49. They have 49,000 undergrads. Morehouse has 2,200. Texas A&M has 49,000 undergrads. In 2016, they graduated 83 Black men. 83. University of Texas graduated 79. At University of Wisconsin, also one of the largest schools in the country, 31,000 undergrads, 650 Black undergrads, and 150 Black men and women who graduated from that school in 2016 and in 2019. And lastly, that means that a school like North Carolina A&T, which has 1,700 Black kids in the engineering department, there are more African-American students in engineering school at North Carolina A&T than there are African-American students on the entire campus of the University of Wisconsin. So I just don't know how you fix what's wrong with America when we think about systemic racism in the post-George Floyd moment without having HBCUs be a part of the picture. So saying that, let me introduce my panel. Let's get right to them. I don't know if they're going to bring them up onto the queue on the stage. Here we go. So first, Mayor Dina Holiday Ingram. Mayor Ingram is the mayor of East Point, Atlanta. As I said, I went to Morehouse. My wife is from Decatur. So, we love all my folks in Georgia. She's a FAMU graduate and a Howard Law School graduate. So for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to introduce folks with titles and try to give you some affiliation. Derek Lewis is on camera. He's part of our sponsorship package. He's the president of the South Division of PepsiCo. He's a Hampton graduate. My brother is a Hampton graduate, so we love Hampton. And then I see Texas Regent Stephanie Nellens Page. She's the regent at Texas Southern University, where I was last year for one of the presidential debates. And she is a Morgan State University alum. And then I see at the bottom of the screen here, we got my brother, Jerron Smith, who's the executive director for the Center for Advocacy Opportunity at the Thurgood Marshall Scholarship Foundation. You may also remember him. He was the most senior African-American in the White House for the last 4 years. And he focused on HBCUs and domestic policy while he was there. So I want to thank everybody else I want to thank all you all for being here. We're not going to do opening statements because I don't want people to have to just sit through, the beginning talking points. I'm going to get straight to the first question, and then you can kind of expand on that as you want. As I started in my opening remarks, we started talking about the usefulness of HBCUs. And Mayor Ingram, let's just start with you as our elected official host here. Talk to the group, the watchers, the viewers, about what you see as the important role that HBCUs play still in modern America.
So good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity. As you said, definitely have orange and green blood in my vein as a FAMU alum. But the role
Adler's right.
The role of HBCU.
I'm sorry, I'm being a little silly because if we can't have like a Black family conversation.
I'm a Bison by law school. This is all of me, right? But it was a choice. And I think what's critically important now is that we continue to choose HBCUs to work alongside us as we do this work in our community to impact our communities. And so Morehouse School of Medicine has actually been a partner with the city of East Point. They provided a $10,000 grant through the Satcher Health Leadership Institute for a Healthy Communities Initiative that helped us kick off our Healthy Point initiative in the city of East Point to really focus on building our residents inside out and making health attainable as a way to address health disparities. And as you know, Morehouse School of Medicine is an amazing medical institution as well as a college, but the knowledge that's there, the work that they've done around health disparities through the Community Voices organization. So really reaching out and partnering with our local HBCUs. And while Morehouse is not actually in the city of East Point, it's about 2 miles away, right down the street. And so I say to my fellow mayors and elected officials, as you're thinking about partnering, it doesn't have to necessarily be in your city. Is there an HBCU nearby? As you think about reaching out to higher education institutions for consulting or for doing studies around your work, for infrastructure, for building, for planning, remember our HBCUs and the knowledge and the talent that is there. And for cities like mine that are cities of majority people of color, that brings a special lens to our work. Something that you don't necessarily have to teach or really express the importance of to consultants, but having organizations that are partnering with you, working with you in the work, who are very familiar with the community that you serve is critically important. And just making sure that you're taking the effort to extend that offer and to partner along the way. We've also partnered with Morehouse on other grant opportunities that they applied for to support the work that they're doing. And so there's amazing opportunity that we can't miss. And in times like these, we must nurture.
Thank you. Jerron, I'm going to come to you because you were in the White House when the former president was really focused on, had a kind of a big moment where he brought historically Black college presidents to the White House, to the Oval Office. Can you talk about the work that you saw from working on HBCU policy and domestic policy in the United States, how you saw HBCUs playing a critical role in what America needs to do to be competitive?
Sure. Well, thanks so much, Jamal, for asking that question. HBCUs are an American asset, especially for the African American community. And for many years, there was a lack of investment in that asset. And so what I was glad or proud about in my time of service was getting both sides of the aisle to put politics aside and focus on investing in that asset. And as a result of it, we were able to get permanent funding. We were able to make the HBCU initiative statutory, and then invest in things like the Pell Grant. And as a result of it, you now see a lot of private sector entities stepping up to the plate. But there's always more to do. With the infrastructure that's on these campuses, there's still a lot of investment that needs to be done. And so, what I think would be helpful, and one thing that we attempted to do was to not only have the federal make a prioritization of HBCUs, but have the state and local communities prioritize HBCUs. And they can do that by creating their own HBCU initiative. And that sends great indicators to the marketplace. And so, if we're trying to leverage these assets so they do the most good for the community, it's focusing on the priorities that are around locally and regionally. Each region around the country has different comparative advantages, whether it's in manufacturing, healthcare, and those businesses need to use these assets to make sure that the priorities of the community also include HBCUs in their strategy. After all, HBCUs are a place where many first-time college students and almost 75% of individuals who go to HBCUs participate in the Pell Grant program. And so, if we're really trying to bridge the gap for all Americans, HBCUs are anchor institutions to help us get there. And so, what we did when I served was hopefully help launch with another partners. But more than anything, HBCUs are no longer a partisan issue; it's a bipartisan issue, and we want to continue to make sure that's the case.
And I think I failed to acknowledge that Jerron is a Howard University undergrad and Howard University Divinity School alum. I'm gonna keep bringing my wife up because I got to stay married. She also is a Howard University alum.
Yeah.
And
here when I was a freshman.
Okay, good. And you will hear probably Howard's name invoked a lot in, of course, this conversation. I think there are a few of them around, and I know right now with Kamala Harris in the White House, y'all got the HBCU big joker right now for the game. But we do have Raphael Warnock from Morehouse, so we got the little joker. Stephanie Nellens Page. I'm sorry. Stephanie Nellens Page. Let's talk to you a little bit at Texas Southern. From Texas Southern, about one of the things that I think has been incredibly important. I think Jerron started to hit on it. Is HBCUs find these diamonds in the rough, right? People that may not get all the way to one of the other schools that some of us have gone to afterward. I know Princeton. I went to Harvard. Or other people on the stage who went to other schools. So the HBCU will find a student like that, kind of shape them up, dust them off, put the pressure on that coal and turn it into that diamond and get it ready to go. Can you talk to me about the importance of that in terms of making sure we still have a robust ecosystem?
Sure, absolutely. And I'm one of those students that they found and made a diamond in the rough. I'd like to think it's tremendously important. A lot of times when we are sending our students off to school, my daughter graduated from Spelman, had a choice of schools to go to, but I wanted her specifically to attend an HBCU. I wanted her to have that nurturing environment that was available, and clearly that's what we are offering at Texas Southern University. Most of our students, probably the vast majority of our students, are coming from social economic backgrounds that have been very depressed. And when they come to the school, they are in need of a lot of social services, a lot of wraparound services. And HBCUs in particular at Texas Southern, we have been able to provide that additional service to our students to make them that diamond in the rough. And we continue to need funding and support around there.
All right. That sounds like a great segue to bring in Derek. Funding and support. Derek Lewis is with Pepsi and is a Hampton grad. Derek, can you talk to us a little bit, not just about, obviously we are all concerned, we can get to how do we financially support these institutions, but also how having gone to an HBCU prepared you for a 30+ year career inside of corporate America, which is a place many people think is not really very hospitable to African Americans.
Well, look, first of all, thanks, Jamal, for having me here. I want to thank AAMA as well, and the other panelists. This is a great conversation. Let me start with one. My career and time at PepsiCo has been tremendous. It's always been a great source, our company, for the support of African Americans coming through. It goes back to the 1940s, where Alan McKellar Jr. and Jeanette Mound were the first two African Americans hired in corporate America. Alan was one of my mentors. He passed away a few years ago, but I still had a relationship with him well into the last 5 or 6 years of his life, and it's been great. I've learned a lot from him, and so I feel as though PepsiCo got this party started many years ago. Hampton obviously is one of the schools amongst many HBCUs that the PepsiCo actively recruits in. I've been a big sponsor. I've carried that journey forward in my 33-year career, and so we're excited about what we're able to do. Not only what we have done, but we're able to do going forward. And so for us now is how to bring more partners together around this initiative to support HBCUs. And I think there's really, if you think about our strategy, there's really 3 parts to it. One is, at this time right now, it's more important than ever to engage in courageous conversations with our partners. So we've got to keep our conversations real. We've got to keep them authentic, get to the root causes of the problems that we're seeing in the marketplace and the communities, embrace this discomfort, I think, to make things better. And that we're seeing some really great progress in being able to embrace partners around this dialogue around racial injustice in our country in support of HBCUs in bigger ways. The second thing is really driving a commitment to action. We have an opportunity to lead by example. We're a big company. We have a lot of scale. We have partners also that have scale and certainly play an important role in the community. And so us taking a leadership effort, walking the talk, bringing people along, getting them to the table, just to commit on the action and make sure we're in the same place from an organizational standpoint, I think is real key. Together, we can bring meaningful change about. And we've, again, started that journey with many of our partners who also now are embracing this in a much bigger way. And last, I would say, defining what success looks like. The score matters here. Scorecarding matters. It matters not only in our day-to-day business, but also when you think about this initiative as well. And so we want to make sure we're able to track progress. We want to make sure we're on the same page in terms of the goals and objectives that we have as our partnerships evolve to help support HBCUs. We've never left HBCUs behind. They've always been the forefront. I'm certainly still an active member at Hampton, served them very well. In other schools, by the way, we developed a great program last summer, or the summer before COVID, called She Got Now, which is all about internships, recognizing and celebrating the women of the past, the present, and the future. That led to 12 internships in a partnership with Essence Magazine. We're replicating that model this summer. We're going to add more internships to that program. We had thousands of applications come through that program. We also did a lot of celebrations on campus, many of which were represented on this call to celebrate the spirit of homecoming and She Got Now. And so we continue to invest heavily in HBCUs at PepsiCo. I continue to invest heavily in HBCUs and what I do at work. And now my goal is to bring more community partners together so we can create more critical mass as an opportunity. You mentioned at the beginning around the need to have more critical mass, and HBCUs have that critical mass we can tap into. So I'm excited about the journey I've had, the impact I've had in the company, and now the impact I can have in the community based on the set of initiatives that we've taken on.
Great, thank you, Mayor Ingram. As a leader of a small city as well as a grad, tell me about. You talked about having relationships with some of the HBCUs that are around you. What role have you found for the graduates inside? Both the places where you've worked and now in the city to help solve any problems or use them critically for any of the personnel questions you have?
It has been a real breath of fresh air to be able to lean on and to attract interns from our HBCUs in the local area. As you all know, cities are we're a full service city, which means we have a fire department, police department, sanitation, parks and rec, everything. And to be able to have young people come in from colleges, HBCUs, to be able to get hands-on experience from a day-to-day perspective of what this opportunity could be. not only is beneficial for the young person or the intern, but it's also very beneficial for the city, because that is an opportunity to try to recruit talent that we can continue to build and have a growing workforce within our city. The areas are really limitless. For every degree, there's probably a department in the city or in a city that could provide some practical experience. We have engineers, we have environmental people, we have a water and sewer department. Like, there are so many opportunities that we have leveraged and will continue to leverage, because it is really important. I know for me, when I was an undergrad, I did internships, right? Even when I went to law school, I had internships to get an idea of what I liked and really what I didn't like. And so that when I graduated, there were some things that I knew, like, you know what, I need to make money to live. I probably shouldn't do that, because that wasn't a good experience. And that, knowing that, is almost as important as knowing what you really like. And so, being able to have those opportunities to be so close and be so meaningful and impactful, again, not only to the municipality, but to the young person in their future career. When I was at Howard University School of Law, our motto was lifting as we climb. And it is really, really important that if somebody helped all of us, right, at some point, a lot of somebody's helped us. And it is really important that we continue to do that, and that we continue to make sure that we are sharing the knowledge and really empowering and equipping our future leaders through hands-on practical experience and soft skills, right? Like, not just the part of it, but having those real conversations and being able to be that mentor and that guide along the way. And so it is extremely invaluable, and the opportunities with municipalities are endless because of the many different operations and departments that we have.
Thank you. Stephanie Knowles Page, at University of Texas, they run a class seminar where students pitch, they pitch startup companies to get into the class, and they have people who help them get their idea from concept to a minimal viable product that they could take out and then go out into the world and try to sell it and raise money for it and grow it. What kind of innovative strategies are the HBCUs in Texas looking at to help students, not just in the traditional things we think about HBCUs for, doctors and medicine and theology and law, but some of the new creative and innovative ways that we can use the resources of these campuses? I think you're on mute.
It's a realistic fact that in the United States, African-American children and other children of color are confronted with barriers to success, which many children of other ethnicities don't seem to have. But what has been demonstrated over and over again is that with proper attitude, dogged determination, and proper education, all children, including African-American and other children of color, can achieve success even in the face of obstructing barriers. Succinctly stated, obstructing barriers, as just observed, are no match for determined African-American and other children of color who are willing to put forth a determined effort to succeed. At Texas Southern University, we're working very closely with corporations as well as the city. For example, here in Houston, the mayor has just been appointed as the climate mayor chair. And so we are going to be working very closely with Texas Southern University around environmental issues. And the like, we have a whole school that's dealing with those types of issues. Out of that can come clean tech, climate tech companies and organizations. From the students that are there, they can be entrepreneurs. This can be a launch pad for these students who are just determined to succeed. We launched a program with St. Luke's Hospital where we're using our pharmaceutical students to actually distribute the vaccination for those students, not just the students and faculty at Texas Southern, but in the entire third ward. So those types of partnerships, and the pharmaceutical students, I might add, they're certified. to administer the vaccination. So it's those types of collaborations that can help with the students in terms of being an entrepreneur and not going into traditional opportunities, but starting their own businesses.
Yeah, and I guess we'd be remiss without, I guess, at least checking in with you on how things are going in Texas right now, both for you personally and for the schools that you work with.
Well, thank you. So we did have to close down on campus. And of course, the number of our students, pipes burst in some of our facilities. So we're trying to get those back up and running. I experienced losing power and water as well for about 2 days myself. So thank you so much for asking, but we're resilient here in Houston, and we're especially resilient. We've always had to take little and make much with our HBCUs. And so we're doing that at Texas Southern, and we're doing that in the city of Houston.
Good. I'm glad things are starting to turn around.
Yes.
Jaron, tell us about what the project you're working on now and how you see HBCUs being a critical component of dealing with the questions you're trying to address.
Sure. So, the one thing that I appreciate when going to Howard University was the fact that the education that I really got was outside the classroom, the late night discussions with my colleagues and peers and all the alum that used to come on campus and talk about how we can empower the community. At the Center for Advancing Opportunity, what we're focused on as a mission is investing into the communities that are fragile and allowing for those communities to develop the solutions to solve for the barriers to opportunity. And so what we're doing is investing in schools like Texas Southern University, where we have Howard Henderson and Howard studying and putting out white papers on how we approach policing in the 21st century, or investing in Albany State University, where we have our Center for Education, looking at solutions to create more access to education, or even investing in Winston-Salem State University, where they're looking at the challenges of economic mobility and home ownership. All of these are things that the Center for Advancing Opportunity is very focused on. And when we take that research and we educate the private sector and the public sector on how do we create solutions to remove barriers for opportunity for our fragile communities all across the country. We also want to create a pipeline of individuals like myself when I was in college talking to my colleagues that wanted to do something. And so we need more social scientists and some of that social science research on these barriers to come from our institutions because they're closer to the communities. And so along with partnerships, we plan to work with a number of different private sector entities, help them research, what works and how we can create these evidence-based policies to change things for the better. And so it's been very exciting, and we look forward to what's ahead.
Very good. Derek Lewis, can we talk a little bit about Stephanie Nellis-Page started to talk about entrepreneurship. I know that Pepsi has a robust distributor program and other projects. Can you talk about how you interact as a company with supporting Black entrepreneurs and what that might look like going forward? As we come out of the COVID, so many, I think 44% perhaps of the African American businesses maybe have gone under in the last year, according to one study. How are you guys thinking about how you play a role with these entrepreneurs and helping them continue to have some robust businesses?
No, it's a great question. And it has been a harsh reality, Jamal, for sure. We've seen it time and time again, certainly throughout all last year, and it's going to be an ongoing challenge this year. Part of our journey at PepsiCo, racial equality, we committed over $430 million on a set of initiatives to help really lift up Black communities. This includes several pillars. There's a people pillar, there is a business pillar, and there's a community pillar. Under people, obviously goes without saying, we want to absolutely increase representation at all levels, particularly the more senior levels in the organization, all the way through C-suite. That means active, recruitment and lean-ins and HBCUs and other places as well. And also it's a cultural defining thing, focusing on training, focusing on our employee resource groups, bringing about a tremendous spirit around the effort on diversity inside our organization. And then the business communities where your question really touches on, how do we drive economic impact? particularly in our communities of color. And this will cover areas such as suppliers. We spend a lot of money on suppliers and network. We need to make sure there's great coverage there within the minority segment. Think about marketing agencies and partners, people who help develop our creative or some of our content. We have customers who obviously own Black-owned businesses. We have entrepreneurs out there who are looking to get into ownership levels at different parts of business. And so our goal is to help lift all those entities up. Last year in the fall, we sponsored Black Entrepreneurs Week. We did a whole segment where Damon John was involved, helped kick it off with us. So we're putting our money where our mouth is. We want to absolutely create organizations and networks and access to people we can provide, help them access capital, help them stand up, become a successful business. If their business is struggling, how can we help either get them into our supplier network or help them get the capabilities and skills, get into other supplier networks? And so that's really the business side of it. And in the community, we didn't really talk about it yet, but we've created a program called Pepsi Stronger Together, one of the strongest programs that I've been a part of in my 33 years, all about tailoring initiatives to the communities to drive need, to build bridges, create those great conversations, but more importantly, create support and create, again, a spirit of togetherness in our community. And I think we all, we're off the races in this journey. It's a long journey for sure. We've got a lot of momentum. I am very committed to lead this effort inside our company, inside our community, inside our marketplace with the organization. But we absolutely are dialed in on driving economic impact to help these businesses not only get back on their feet, but thrive and be very, very successful as they go forward.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Ingram, one of the big questions of the last year obviously what we faced from coronavirus has been incredibly impactful, but we've also had this concurrent issue that's been moving along at the same time of criminal justice and dealing with police and young people. As the mayor of a city, particularly with a lot of young people, a lot of African Americans, how have you thought about that question? How are you dealing with some of these questions about how we police communities effectively, but also make sure people don't overstep their roles?
Yeah, so you're quite on point with the dual pandemics, and some even call it the triple pandemic, right? So COVID, racism, and then the economic pandemic as well. So it was interesting, after George Floyd's murder on camera, the whole world started crying out for us to dismantle systemic racism. Not just Black people,
right?
Of all races, all ethnicities across the world. There were protests across the world. And so our city is a city that is a majority city of color, about 76% African American, about 10 or 11% Hispanic, and about 16% white. And the majority of our workforce is also African American. There are 9 of us on council, the mayor and 8 council members, and 8 of us are African American, right? And so oftentimes, it's easy to feel like, well, that's not us, right? Because, we're all of color. But I'm a firm believer in we definitely shouldn't take anything for granted and look at what we're doing. So President Obama called on mayors at that time to review our police use of force policies and adopt the 8 that can't wait. And so we immediately looked at ours. We already had in place 6 out of the 8 that can't wait, and then soon had all 8. And so, of course, if people aren't familiar with that, that's banning chokeholds, making sure that you knock before you enter, exhausting, making sure that you're exhausting other options before pulling a gun. Like those very proactive processes or practices from a policing perspective. And so we've done that, and we'll continue to look at our use of force. We also looked at the number of people who may have, what were the injuries within custody of our police officers, and our numbers were really low. But that doesn't mean that there's not work to do. I think a huge opportunity around this is really looking at other community alternatives and diversion for those issues that are not really policing in nature, like, interacting with people experiencing homelessness, people who may be experiencing mental illness, like those types of issues that aren't policing. They're not for police. They're really for people who are trained in that way. And how do we partner and use the systems that are there to really do some community alternatives and diversion of that? So we started having conversations around those initiatives as well, because we all know a situation can escalate this quick. And if you have people who are involved that aren't trained in that way, it doesn't mean anything. Police officers are trained to police. But there are situations where there needs to be a more social work or more, a different type of response. But I am the person who definitely will say that there is absolutely a need and will always be a need for police officers, because there are serious incidents, and those require trained police officers, but having that full continuum. So we're looking at how do we incorporate community alternatives and diversions. One of there's an initiative in a neighboring city where they actually create a 311 number. And so people in the community, instead of calling 911, you call 311, and then a team of a social worker and other people who deal with those situations show up before the police, right? Instead of calling the police, you call them. And so looking at ways to do things differently and to really focus on people and what people need in that time, not the militarization of things or not the strict compliance or enforcement, but what do people need and how do we connect them in those moments to the support that they need. And so we're really trying to look at it from a holistic perspective in that way. But it really first requires focusing on people and listening to people and being in the community and making sure that when we say that police officers are protecting and serving, that they do that for all citizens. It doesn't matter who they are, that when they go out, that is what they are trained to do, and that is actually what they do. That they treat everybody with dignity and respect. And when it's not done, that we don't try and cover it up. We say, this was not right, and this is how we're going to fix it and move on. So it's real candid conversations, being honest, being willing to inspect what is going on, and then being willing to pivot and be innovative and think outside the box to focus on people. And of course, that's what HBCUs teach you, right? The people, we have to focus on people. That is about service to others and is about lifting as we climb.
Absolutely. Teron, can we circle back to something I think that also has been we got to get back to, is this idea of entrepreneurship and getting young people thinking about how they start a career where they're not just going to be employed by somebody for the rest of their life, because the future of work and income may be that none of us has a job anymore. I mean, Derek's lucky. He's been at Pepsi for a long time. Most of the rest of us have had to move around a little bit more, a little bit more than that. So you got to have a certain set of skills to be competitive, to be able to make those kind of transitions and start off with lifetime learning. We're at Thurgood Marshall or the other work you're doing. How are you guys thinking about a new culture of, there's some entrepreneurship, there's some gig work, there's some, professional work that people may do. They may have a variety of things in their lives that help them earn income.
Sure. So I think Thurgood Marshall, they're focused. They have a program specifically focused around entrepreneurship, and at Center for Advancing Opportunity, as a part of Thurgood Marshall, plan to partner with that program, and looking at two pieces. Access to capital is one of the core pieces. But once people get that capital, how do you ensure that you're profitable and that you're growing your business? One thing that we found with the pandemic is that 93% of African-American owned businesses are single person firms. Many of them weren't able to access the PPP program because they don't have a traditional banking relationship, and those doors to access to capital have been closed. And so we have to be very nuanced in how we approach this issue, and working with our HBCUs to develop those pipelines for our future entrepreneurs, our future business creators, our future manufacturers is going to be extremely important. And we can do that by partnering with companies like Pepsi, Robert Smith. Robert Smith's put a lot of investment on trying to help those CDFI funds, community development financial institutions, help train people and businesses with the technology they need to be successful in the 21st century as a business. And so at CAO, we're going to look into a lot of those things, put some critical research behind it, so that we can make sure that we're being very precise with solving the problem. But those two pieces alone, access to capital and having a mentoring / training around entrepreneurship and how to be successful, how to be profitable, are going to be main pillars to it. Another individual that I talked very closely with is Bob Johnson, who was the one that first addressed this whole profitability piece. He was like, look, most entrepreneurs, if they want to grow their business, want to kind of invest, if you're a hair salon, you want to invest into another chair, and so if I get that access to that other chair, how can I take that funding and make sure, I'm able to pay back my debt and then become even more profitable. And so those are some of the things that CAO is going to look into over the next year. But of course, that's going to take some strategic partnerships with some of those leaders, as well as some of the local leaders on the federal, state, and local level. These ecosystems has to have all above approach. We need the private sector, the public sector, to put their heads together to create these ecosystems of opportunity. And they're going to look different around the country. And so that's why we have to be laser focused on, what's working for Mississippi versus Detroit versus New York, because all of those ecosystems are different. And so navigating it with that capital and being able to be successful is going to be critical.
Okay. And Regent Nolan's Page, I think you want to get in on this point. I think you're muted again.
I'm sorry. We really do need to partner, and corporations need to partner with HBCUs to look at future majors. One of the things that I've done a lot of work in education to work, and it's almost a miss when you talk about connecting the education, to work. And so we as universities, period, but HBCUs in particular, we have to do more in terms of what our curriculum looks like to connect education to work, to get into some of the future activities like gaming and having curriculum around gaming, cannabis training, and policies and studies and research, the artificial intelligence and space. So we need to really collaborate with policymakers as well as corporate America to have those future curriculums in place at HBCU so our students can take advantage of them as well.
I was just smiling because I was thinking if college is anything like it was when I was there, their cannabis is around campus.
Yes, it is. So you may as well do some research around it, right?
Right. They better learn how to make some legal money.
Right.
But let's stay on that. Let's stay on that for a minute, because you're talking about this bringing these new curriculum. I have a friend who was doing some work for one of the big tech companies, and he went into one of the HBCUs to try to help them get their students the curriculum together. Could they recruit there? How do they build a partnership between this company and the campus? And one of the things that he found, so we're gonna have a family conversation for a second. One of the things that he found was that when he was talking to the people in the computer science program, they weren't actually teaching the students the coding disciplines that they were using in the companies. They were teaching them sort of like the theory of coding, not the application of coding that would help them get a job if they went to apply at one of these Silicon Valley companies. So they had to go into the campus and go into the department and really work with them on teaching them how to practically apply what they were learning, not just prepare them for academic study in the field. Is that a challenge you've heard, anything like that in your work?
Well, I will tell you, I have, and this is, I guess, if you have to kind of just take a step back and look at the higher education, okay, particularly four-year institution. They were there to set up to teach critical thinking skills and things of that nature. My parents, they didn't look at it that way, and most parents don't. I'm sending you to college to get a degree, higher education, so that you can get a better job. And it's nice to think critically because you are going to need those skills, don't get me wrong, but you also have to prepare the student to go to work afterwards, because so many times students are graduating and they're not using their degrees. I know Gallup did a study not too long ago talking about just that. And so how do we we have to really have I like to call it a reimagining higher education to really understand that there is a focus that needs to happen about training for the future work. We need to focus more on the dropout, the stop out, the adult learner. And they've gone on to work for whatever situation that they had to drop out of school. So how are universities dealing with that, especially in the African American community, so they have more hands-on type of experience? Well, one way to do it is to start bringing in corporate America and having that collaboration, so you don't get this miss, but you get this. The corporate America will get what they need as far as the skills coming out of college, and the university and the students are going to get skill sets that they are going to be able to use immediately. I know in the community colleges, they really worked very hard at making that connection, and we really need to make that leap more in higher education. The other piece of it is that when corporate goes in to higher education, corporate needs to understand that this is an academic environment. So it's going to really take some kumbaya moments to bring it together, because when I was recruiting for corporate America, just getting through the methodology and the whole process, I'm looking at time is money. I need your students. I need to get a program in place. And so I had to really get some patience the night before, quite frankly. And we ended up getting some good partnerships going. But corporate America know that when you go in, and for the universities, when you are dealing with corporate America, there's a whole different mindset. And so that needs to really come together.
That's right. Mayor Ingram?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and add the African American Mayors Association, AMA, published a report on the future of work. And the future of work report indicates that communities of color will disproportionately be impacted, jobs that are lost because of the future of work and the automation and the technology and advancements in this that will be happening. And I think that is a huge opportunity for, AMA and elected officials to partner with HBCUs just around exactly what Ms. Regent Nelson Page is talking about. We know that this is going to happen. So are we going to take this work, the report that basically says that this is what's going to happen, what we see happening, are we just going to sit by and let it happen? Or are we going to start now making those connections between corporate and the universities, and even backing up maybe even the high school? But what are we going to do to make sure that we lessen the disproportionate impact that we know is going to happen on people of color because of the future of work and automation in this country? And so I just wanted to echo everything that Nelson Page has been saying, as well as the work of AMA, who that is already spotlighted. This is an issue, and we need to figure it out now, and we need to do it with all speed and deliberate action.
Yes.
If not, our communities are going to be disproportionately impacted. I mean, as with everything else, right? When the disparities come up, we usually are in the line. But we know this, we can have a head start on actually pivoting right now and dealing with that, so that the future reality is not so disproportionate, and that we are now preparing people for jobs of the future, not jobs of the past.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of add down, that's what I was really speaking to at the beginning of our conversation, is this investment in infrastructure on the campuses is going to be critical with navigating and opening up pathways for industries of the future. And so this week, Congress is working with Thurgood Marshall and UNCF. They're having their HBCU fly-in. And these are the very discussions that they're discussing right now. How do we invest more R&D dollars in the future that America is investing in, and make sure that the HBCUs are a part of that pipeline? I mean, we have hundreds of billions of R&D dollars that goes to a lot of different universities, but miss our HBCUs.
Yes.
And they're critical with solving some of these solutions. I mean, you can take the pandemic as an example. When you're talking about healthcare infrastructure and how it impacts the minority communities, there's only 4 schools that have the capabilities in the background for how it touches African Americans. Morehouse Medical School, Meharry Medical School, Howard University Medical School, and Drew Medical School. And so them having the infrastructure in place to be able to scale their research is critical with helping African American communities not only around the country but around the world. And so putting the money right there in the institution so they have the infrastructure to have the capabilities to train the students for the future is also going to be a really important pillar that has to be a part of the equation with preparing for industries of the future.
I can't hear you.
I think you're muted, Jamal.
This time it's me. Okay, this time it's me. I'm gonna finish with this. Derek, we've been having this conversation about skills. We're having a conversation about technical capacity. I've been an entrepreneur. I know I know intimately the two biggest hurdles are money or financing and technical assistance and finding people who can actually do the work that you need to get done. How are companies thinking about, or how can companies think about, how can universities and colleges think about working better with the corporate sector to help them both find the employees they need, access the research that they may need, or whatever other assets they need in order to work, that you can get, frankly, a better financial relationship to support some of these schools and get the students better opportunities once they get out so that they have more fulfilling careers?
I think it's a very important question. My motto, at least, is no HBC left behind. So I think you've got to have this vision that you can't leave anybody behind, no matter how the size, the location. All these schools matter. They provide an incredible students. In our case, we've actually added resources so we can go deeper and go wider across the HBCU network. I'm really excited about where we're headed. So I think companies have to, as part of their commitment, as they establish their own pillars for success, have to make sure they're including the comprehensive HBCU network, not just cherry picking a few that I think some organizations tend to do. So I think that's the first thing. Broadly speaking, I think, making sure that there's a real commitment at the highest levels of the organization to actively pursue HBCUs. Again, you brought up the compelling statistics at the beginning around number of African Americans graduating from a Morehouse versus a Texas A&M. That's very, very compelling. You want critical mass your organization, you need to go where the critical mass is. So I think there's got to be commitment there. You've got to have a real bias for action. I think you've got to deploy resources. In the case I talked about, adding resources to provide coverage to these schools. I think you've got to absolutely empower the organization at whole to be aggressive with their pursuit of supporting HBCUs. And I think you got to have a scorecard at the end of the day, because you can do a lot of talking, you can do a lot of present a lot of PowerPoint decks, but at the end of the day, it's about the score. And are you hiring students? Are those students being developed? Are they growing within your organization? Are you creating mechanisms for entrepreneurs to be successful in the market? Are you supporting Black-owned businesses, supporting Black agencies? Show us your scorecard. So I think that's a real critical aspect of doing this. So no HBCU left behind, having a real sort of commitment in action. I gave you a COACH model. That was an acronym, COACH. And I think at the end of the day, making sure everybody understands that, the scorecard is a real big part of this in terms of where you're headed.
All right. Sounds good. All right. I think that is going to wrap us up for time for today. I want to thank this incredible panel for being here. I think we had a lot of different perspectives. Yeah, this was a good conversation. Hopefully, these things will continue with the African American Mayors Association. I know that they've got a lot of things planned coming up for the next year. And so Mayor Ingram, as our mayor on the panel, thank you for holding us down during this hour. All right. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie. I think we're going to take a little bit of a break. Folks should just hold tight. We're going to change the panel out, and then we'll come back with a new conversation.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
All right. Are we ready to get started?
I think so, Jamal.
All right. Good enough. Okay. 3, 2, 1, as they do in my business. Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. We are back to have our second conversation to talk about HBCUs and the role they're playing in some of the challenges that we're facing today. The conversation we're going to have right now is specifically around the pandemic that we're all facing. The reason why we're doing this, I'm doing this from, my office in my house, instead of us all doing this on a stage somewhere where we can have some, coffee and coffee and bad food in the back while we're having this discussion. So I want to thank right now, we got Mayor McKinley Price, who has joined us. You heard from him in the beginning. We'll get him started. Mayor McKinley Price, in addition to being the mayor of Newport News, is also a dentist. So he can talk to us from a practical perspective. And he is a Hampton University alum, a place where I have spent a lot of time in my life. My brother went there, friends went there, the Harvey family close to. Howard Dental School alum also. My physician is a dentist from Howard. And then also joining us is Dr. Joya Crier-Perry. Did I get that right, Dr. Perry? Joya Crier-Perry?
It's fine. I answered anything. I'm good.
You let me know if I mess it up. She's the founder and president of the National Birth Equity Collaborative, and she's focused on racism as a root cause of health inequities. She also went to Xavier University. So thank you both for being here and for having this conversation. Mayor Price, did you want to just get us started in general and talk to us about the role of Black physicians and medical personnel in this moment and how we are relying upon them?
Absolutely. Because of historically some of the things that have unfortunately happened in medicine with the minority race or Black race, there's a lot of suspicion going on. Let's talk about the vaccine in particular. So we have to overcome that. And so we always mention Tuskegee and what happened there, but I think we need to change that negative approach and talk more about the people who are actively right now on a waiting list to get this vaccine, for them not to lose their patience with this. This is going to take a little while for us to get around to everyone. And there's a hierarchy of doing this with, minorities and the elderly. Those of us who are in the political life are actually filming us getting vaccinated so that we can show this, as was done with me, public service announcements, they're called. So we have to make sure that people like my mother, who is 102,
Oh, wow.
in a facility, gets vaccinated. And we have to go to where the need is. And I think one of the things the pandemic has showed us, that the disparity in resources covers all gamut, from people being able to get to the facility, from being able to have the internet, to be able to get online, to register. All of these things have to be overcome so that we can make sure that those who want this vaccine are able to get it.
All right. And Dr. Perry, you're focused specifically on health inequities.
Yeah.
So can you piggyback and get into that conversation, particularly, around this? Let's just jump to the question at hand for most people around the vaccine, access to the vaccine. And if you get access, should you get it? And what's maybe in the way of you getting it?
And I'm going to try really hard not to get too wonky, because sometimes for us physicians, we can get all into like the weeds and the details. And I want to thank Mayor McKinley and you, Jamal, and the African American Mayors Association for having me. So we know that there is a lot of language right now about Black people being hesitant, vaccine hesitancy, that's the language. But there's a history of also blaming and shaming Black communities for not doing things that are considered to be healthy. And we know for evidence shows us that right now across this country, there are many Black people, as the mayor mentioned, on waiting lists trying to figure out how to get the vaccine. But yet the media focuses so heavily on this historical hesitancy. We have elders who are in nursing homes who are in the facilities, who are in homes with other loved ones, who are not getting access to the vaccine. So we're really trying to, so a health inequity is when you have policies and culture that believes that certain people should have and other people should not. And that's how our entire country has been built. So it's not that Blackness is broken, that we just make bad choices, that we're all so afraid of science. None of that is true. There are a lot of white folks who don't want the vaccine, right? Like, it's not like some Black thing, right? Right now, though, we recognize they found us. So here's the other truth. We were able for the first time to participate a lot in the creation of these vaccines. We have Dr. Kizzy, who's a beautiful Black woman, who's one of the virologists, who's one of the creators of participants in the Moderna vaccine. We had a lot of people participating in the creation of the vaccine. So these pharmaceutical companies and NIH spent a lot of effort ensuring that it was tested on and with Black people included in the clinical trials. The problem that we're having right now is that same effort and energy that was put into ensuring that we were part of the clinical trials is not being put into ensuring that we actually receive the vaccine. So places and cities are putting testing sites in Black communities, but then people who have more access to internet, more access to cars are driving to those communities and taking the vaccines that are meant for the people who live in those communities. And there are policies and choices that we can make, and that's how inequities get made, that we could stop that. We could say, you can't come to the hood unless you have an address in the hood to get this vaccine. We could make that a rule. We have not chosen to make that a rule, right? We have chosen for some places, there are some places that are giving the vaccine to homeowners associations, which are in predominantly white neighborhoods. So they're saying by rule, you only get this vaccine if you're a member or a homeowner. They're valuing the homeowners, the white people who own homes in these elderly communities. But if you are sending the vaccines to a pharmacy at a Safeway or at a, somewhere in a community and then not making any kind of rule around who can get it, you are then once again creating inequity. So our job at the National Birth Equity Collaborative, I'm also part of the We Must Count Coalition, is to point out how it's not that Black people are just afraid or making bad choices. We keep creating policies that don't value Black people. We don't go to where they are. We're not saying, if you just put something at a grocery store and say whoever shows up and has internet come, that's going to fail. We know that's going to fail because elderly Black folks are not going to the grocery store right now. Why? They shouldn't be. We told them all to stay home. Now we're saying come back out and get a shot, right? Like this, it just doesn't, our strategy was not embedded with a desire for equity. So I do think we're trying to figure that out now. I do think that the current administration is buying more vaccines and working on a strategy to actually get it to people in their homes, working with local mayors, working with local CBOs, really investing in meeting people where they are and not just using this technology. Capitalism is going to be our public health strategy. It's not a good strategy at all. So.
Yeah, my mom, who lives nearby where I am, she's in Prince George's County. She got her first shot because she lives in a building of seniors, right? It's a senior building, and the pharmacy came to the building, set up in the recreation room, and everybody, just filtered through at their proper time and got their shot. They're about to get the second ones. It seems to me like that seems like a fairly a decent way to get to the point you're making. Go to large church memberships and say, if you remember the church, everybody come to the narthex, at whatever time and get your shot.
For sure. Yeah.
So, Dr. Price, you're a mayor, and so as you're thinking about this, how do you want to make sure that we have equity in distribution of the vaccine and not just having folks who are coming in from some of the other communities and getting their shots?
Well, what we're doing is partnering with hospitals like Riverside Hospital here is now taking some of the doses that they have, and we're targeting communities of color and poverty. So we will be setting up clinics, in neighborhood clinics or large areas where the shots can be given safely. So the main thing is to try and get the vaccine that you have to the people who need it, and so that they don't have to get a bus to go 20 miles out of the way. As Dr. Perry just pointed out, the inequities that are there. My son, who lives in New York, he said he went to a very poor neighborhood to get his shot, and all he saw was white people in line. He said, they're on cell phones, texting. And sometimes if there are people who don't show up, and there are people in line, we need to be able to take that vaccine and put it where it's needed. Those who have higher priority, those with disparities in their health, those who are more likely, twice as likely as we are as a race to succumb from this disease. So we have to do that extra effort, as Dr. Perry just said, of making sure that we reach the population that needs it the most.
So let's back up a little bit, a little earlier in the pipeline here, right? So we're talking about the end of the pipeline, which is putting jabs in the arms of customers, of patients. But before that, we got to get to who are the people who are qualified, who can, make diagnosis or to treat these customers, treat these patients. And so that's the place where we're talking about HBCUs that it seems like we're an incredibly important area. I think right now, the number one and number two undergraduate institutions that have medical college applications are both historically Black colleges, universities. What's the problem? What is the problem at the mainstream campuses that they can't get? They have these huge populations of people, 30, 40,000 people on campus, but they can't get more than a few dozen people of color to focus on some of these high impact careers.
Yeah, I mean, I can take a stab at it from my both anecdotally and also from my own life experience, but also from my friends and as a physician. So I started off at Princeton, and I could tell you, being a Black woman at Princeton is exciting, and also ain't nobody checking for you, right? Like nobody's saying, I want you to go to med school. I mean, if you happen to do all the things to get there, yes, but it's not a pipeline program dedicated to ensuring that Black people become physicians. Grew up in the big city of Grambling, right, where the president of the university went to high school with me, Ricky Gallo. So I grew up in a place where people valued Black folks and people cheered for me, wanted me to be whatever I wanted to be. So to move from an environment where people were creating structures to ensure your success to an environment in a mainstream university like Princeton or like most large PWIs, they're not there to cheer on for your success, right? It's much more competitive, sharp elbows. Like if you can get it, you can get it. If you can't, you can't. So there's not this desire to create structure. Coming home to Xavier to take my classes to go to medical school, I went back again to a place where people wanted me to succeed, where there was a system and a structure created to ensure that I went to medical school, that there was all the systems in place to ensure that they knew where the people usually got in who came from Xavier, how that happens. And so unless you focus fully on ensuring that people who look like us are able to get into med school, it's not going to happen. There's a reason why I went to medical school at LSU, and the majority of the students are alumni children, because to go into medicine is very much so, somebody, right? The path. It's a very concrete, it's a very, no, somebody's not the right language I want to use. You know how to get there. There's someone has to explain to you what class you need to take. You have to do these things. And so you have a big up if you are an alumni child. If you have a parent who can explain to you need to take biology this year, chemistry that year. So you replacing that infrastructure around what you need to know, where you need to intern, how you need to do all those things. That's a lot of information that you have an advantage for. And then I'll just end by saying that in Louisiana, I went to med school for free, and many of my friends did, because back then we were under a consent decree because the state had been sued by the NAACP, because although we paid 35% of the taxes, because 35% of the state is Black, less than 10% of the people who were in medical school were Black. Medical school, dental school, nursing school. So many of my colleagues for years came home and went to LSU for medical school because the state was sued and we had to go to school for free. I think it's time to re-up that lawsuit, right? There are many states that are failing their obligation to Black communities. There are many states that are not meeting the needs of the numbers of people who are in medical school, that the state public schools don't match the actual community members and are not reflective of the community. We need to hold that accountable. We are not in a race-blind country. Racism is not over. And so really undoing, instead of calling it affirmative action, really reparative action. We're at a place we need to repair the hundreds of years of disinvestment. And so, yes, we know that there's a study that showed that the closing of medical schools like in New Orleans with Flint Goodrich and in Detroit, there were many more Black medical schools than the 4 that were mentioned earlier. And that we would have at least 50,000 more Black physicians today if we had not, by policy from the White House down, shut down these medical schools. So it's just important for us to really think about, if we're going to move forward, repairing the damage that racism has done to Black physicians and Black people across the country.
So yeah, my aunt was a woman named Jamal Simmons who helped do a program at Wayne State University, a post-bac program for people who want to go to medical school. And, that program has pretty much been defunded over the last few years. And not only did people go to Wayne State, right? And you know this, not only did people go to Wayne State, but they also went to many other schools because they had the training in order to get there. Mayor Price, as a politician, what do we do from a public policy perspective? Because we know that this is a problem. I mean, the numbers are just unmistakable. We know that this is a problem. How is it that we as a society help solve this question of getting people educated, focused, and then through school so that they can help serve these communities?
Well, I think one of the things, and I'll use my experience as an example. I went to undergraduate school on a tennis scholarship. Wasn't a brilliant student, but wanted to be in the medical field. I knew that. So I had an experience due to an IBM program that sponsored minorities, trying to get more minorities in the health professions. So I did a summer after my junior year at Georgetown University, and just exposed to the array of opportunities that were in medicine and dentistry. And actually was the chairman of the physiology department after I was helping a PhD do some surgery on rats. He said, Price, you have great hands, you like technology. Have you ever thought of dentistry? Because at first I was hell-bent on going to being a physician like my father-in-law was. And I said, no, I hadn't. And then I came back and I thought about it and applied to dental school in Howard. It was because of that exposure to other things, which we need. We need more residency programs. We need more mentorship programs to expose people who may be chemistry majors, math majors, whatever, that never thought of the other opportunities that are out there where you can merge technology and art together and be a textbook author. There's so many things you can do in the medical field. But the main thing is that having the opportunity for people to be exposed to the fact that it is not out of the realm to be a physician or a dentist. I personally don't think you have to be brilliant to be either one. You need discipline. You need to be able to do certain hurdles like organic chemistry. Once you get over some of those hurdles, you know that you can do what anybody else can do. And my career, which is 40 plus years in dentistry, I'll stand my dentistry up against anybody in the country.
So, you bring up this point. I think we should focus on this for a second. Mentorship and the guideposts. And Joy, you started down this path. When I first moved to Washington, I lived in the attic above a psychiatrist's office because I didn't have any money. And as a friend of mine's dad let me live in his attic. And so he told me very clearly that there were a lot of young African Americans who got coursed out of being psychiatrists because while they were in school, somebody said to them, you can get a PhD in psychology for less money and less time than going to medical school and then becoming a psychiatrist. And so he saw many classmates, and he saw this for years, of people who got sort of like guided out of this path. People say the same thing in computer science. People have a hard time. You talk about organic chemistry. You hear about this a lot from people who are in the medical profession. There are courses like this in computer science, right? Sort of the weeding course. Right. But what they don't know is if you make it past this course, which everybody has a hard time, you actually can be, fine. Yeah. And so you see a lot of people who go into computer science, and instead of staying along that path, they end up being math majors and they become, math teachers or whatever, because they think they can't make it. This question of mentorship, which is the place where I think HBCUs are particularly well adept. And Dr. Perry, you talked about this, having somebody who's committed to your success, getting you past the hurdles to the next point of departure in this career.
Yeah, I mean, I have to. I'm always going to love Xavier, and probably you already know that that there are fewer Black men in medical school today than there were in the 1970s, right? And so we are doing a poor job of continuing those pathways and those mentorship programs that were put into place in the beginning of the area of kind of affirmative action. And there was this moment, I guess, that people said, "Oh, we're all fine, everybody's equal." And when you get rid of those pathways, when you get rid of that investment in the Xaviers, that investments in the Hamptons, investment in these programs that were huge pipeline programs. I mean, I did every summer at Xavier Math Star, Chem Star, BioStar, a lot of the physicians that I know across the country, I met them in summer programs at Xavier, right? So like it's a even though I went away to Princeton, coming home, it was like home. I knew they had to, they knew who's going to go into optometry school, dental school, like all the different ranges of the possibilities. And so then having alumni from those different fields, right? So having alumni who are dentists who can come and mentor, and you can come and spend some time with, you can see that's a great role for HBCUs. I mentioned in my own hometown of Grambling. I mean, I know the people who were physicians who had attended Grambling, I knew them in New Orleans. Like I knew they were friends. I would see them practicing. I would go to their offices. And so you need that pathway. But one of the reasons that we don't, besides the fact that we've decimated the mentorship programs, the federal monies that would go to HCOP and all these kind of higher ed programs, we got rid of a lot of those things, is that we haven't created an opportunity to invest in HBCUs getting access to their own more medical schools, right? Like we need more. A lot of medical schools increased in the last 10 years, but they're not affiliated with HBCUs. And so they're affiliated with other kinds of schools. And we know that there's a direct correlative between having access. There's no midwifery school at a HBCU. We have a bunch of nursing schools, but we don't have a nurse midwifery program at any HBCU. As an OBGYN, I can tell you that would be an amazing opportunity to have a midwifery school at an HBCU. We created midwifery, right? Like in the United States, we were birthing everybody's babies. We were birthing Black babies, white babies. So the fact that there are fewer Black midwives and there are Black OBGYNs is a direct correlation of this lack of mentorship, lack of investment, and really the decimation of a field.
So, this is in, I don't know, I can go off on these tangents for a long time, especially I've got two kids now who are, I got an 18-month-old and a 3-year-old. So we have just gone through this birthing process, and we're going to circle back to why there's not any money spent on fibroid research and fixing. We're going
a whole conversation.
We're going to put a pin in that one. If white women were getting fibroids the way Black women were, you could believe we would have.
Yeah, for sure.
But Dr. Price, you're at Newport News. Hampton is right near you. You've got other schools who are nearby. I know Hampton is very focused on, I guess, they've got nursing, they've got, they do a lot of work around the military and healthcare. How do you see the interplay of using HBCUs in communities to help augment the healthcare that's available? Have you seen that work, and how do you think that should work better?
Well, I think a lot of it, and I've done a podcast with Dr. Harvey, he realizes the impact of what an HBCU can have on a community. I think it's estimated about $2 billion on our regional community here, what Hampton focuses on the economy here in this area. So, having a proton therapy unit here at Hampton, the largest probably in the country, that type of experience and knowledge that he has, and also mentoring other presidents of colleges, it has just had a tremendous impact. And establishing relationships with cities. Dr. Harvey and I have a great relationship. So anytime he has a need, anything I can do, I'm open to, and vice versa. So it depends on, I think, those people who are in the leadership role at HBCUs need to understand that there are opportunities out here for us as mayors, politicians, and policymakers that can be beneficial, and trying to make sure that he has access to those needs. Those resources.
Yeah, Dr. Perry, what about you? Have you seen HBCUs play a strong role in community healthcare delivery, and how can it be better?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm going to get off of Xavier for a minute, since. But
they're doing a lot of work, so I don't want we don't have to. You have
Morehouse School of Medicine that has the Satcher Institute, deeply invested in community building and community engagement. You have, Meharry, UCLA Drew. If it were not for Drew, the entire community in Los Angeles would not receive care, right? So many people who are orthopedic surgeons today, who are dermatologists today, they are able to get that training through the Drews, through the Meharrys, through the Morehouses. So it's so important that we have to have that commitment. And, I mentioned Rick Gallo, the president of Grambling. When we were growing up, his dad was the mayor, right? So it's like this direct correlation between understanding the power of city government and how important it was to have kind of a city. And when we moved there, my mother's a pharmacist, and we just moved from New Orleans and the mayor put us up so she could open a pharmacy in a Black city. Like there's so much that you can have when you invest in and believe in the brilliance of Black people and what we can do together and how we can create community. And the tie, I love Mayor McKinley talking about the tie between town and gown and the importance of investing in the pipeline. Most people stay where they train. 80% of people stay where they train in medical school or residency. So that tie between the mayor and whatever training institution is there is so critical, because that's who's going to really be caring for your community members after the fact. So, you know, from big cities like Detroit to small towns like Grambling, having majority Black cities also tied to HBCUs and the health of HBCUs is really important.
You know, one of these moments, you know, now I'm in television news. And so we're starting to see, it's interesting. In the beginning of the pandemic, there weren't really that many Black doctors that were being featured. I had a conversation for my podcast on Instagram with Dr. Hildreth from Meharry. And it was amazing to me that, you know, here's this man who's got this great virology, you know, background, and we're talking about the biggest, you know, healthcare pandemic. And he wasn't really somebody that people were talking to. Right. But now we're starting to see it. At USC, Gina Davis, who you may remember is the actress who has been in a bunch of movies.
Area.
Exactly. Gina Davis has a program where they started focusing on getting women in Hollywood. So Hollywood roles that don't really have a gender reason to be male, having those roles be depicted by women. Mm-hmm. And so one of the pieces of evidence they use is the impact of CSI shows mm-hmm. on forensic science education. And now what you've seen since all these CSI shows have popped up in the last 20 years is like 70% of the students in forensic science are women. Right. Because they have seen women in these roles. Yeah. So it just says to me, like, I don't know how we get more more role models, more people like you in front of these young students, particularly I'm a father of daughter now, but even before that, like, you know, get more women in front of these girls who are doctors who say, listen, you can go and do this and you can actually solve the problems of people like you. You know, the medical profession.
Stuffins with I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, for some reason, you know, like you just talked about. I remember a program. I think it was LA Law. You know, the application rate went crazy for lawyers at one time. But think, how many positive role models do you see that are dentists? Right. I mean, think how historically the shows. Right. Mary Tyler Moore, the guy, the goofball that was a neighbor, was a dentist. What's the one where the plant is eating somebody? Horror. Oh, I mean, you just go down the list of all the movies. There are very few, you know, roles where the dentists are highlighted in a positive manner. And so, you know, kids that are like, you know, I don't know if I want to be a dentist or not. Parents threaten their kids. You know, if you don't behave, I'm gonna take you to the dentist.
Definitely not helping.
What they should do is highlight my dentist's Instagram feed of his vacations.
Yeah, my stepmother, my dad's is a dentist, and my little brother's applying to dental school right now. So I'll have you know, we have a lot of dentists in the family, you know. But yes, Doc McStuffin was a big help for us. She's a Black character on Disney who was a doctor who took care of a veterinary, took care of pets and different things. And that character, then there was a group of Black female women physicians who worked with Disney around Doc McStuffin for a while and being representative and showing up in place. I think that's a really, and who you see and how you see yourself is so important. And it's so important to have those characters. And
there are more female dentists in dental school now than there are males.
Yeah, it's more Black women in medical school as well. So it's really a thing. Like, it's really, that's why the reimagining and they have the scores. So here's where we're getting stuck a lot of the time. They're getting counseled out, to your point earlier, Jamal. There are enough Black men who are trying to get into med school, like they're on the path, but they're not getting counseled to continue. They're not getting the right information to be able to complete. And if you make a score, it's like Alabama for the vaccine, tying it back to the vaccine conversation. So if you say the cutoff to get the vaccine is age 70 and the average Black man in death in Alabama is 68, you created a score that you're saying people are not going to make, right? And that happens with us when it comes to medical school. If the average cutoff for the score to get in is 53, I don't know the numbers anymore, and you say your cutoff and Black men are on average making 52. Just at one point, you're getting rid of all the people who can come to your school. And we know there's no correlation between that score and your ability to practice medicine. Like that, it's arbitrary and made up. It has nothing to do with anything. So the mere fact that you're cutting out all these people's ability to become physicians based upon a few points on a score, that's a policy choice. That's racism.
And there are schools like Hampton, because I'm familiar with, they have a program, a 5-year program, where you can, if you go through this course and you're successful, you're hooked up with a school application. You're automatically accepted to that school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to do stuff like that because we recognize these tests were never built for us. They weren't built for freedom. They weren't built to end racism. They weren't even built for us to be healthy, for Black folks to be healthy. They were built as weeders out, to keep people out and to keep people who look like us from being in practice. And we know, I mean, I'm a person that always did well on tests, but that doesn't mean that should be the standard in the role. We really need there to be, what does it mean for someone to be a good provider? And as you mentioned earlier, I mean, there's a study that shows that if you want to get a vaccine, you're 50% more likely to say yes if you're Black, if your doctor is Black. So there's like a critical reason to have more Black doctors. You're more likely to hear us differently when we're describing the vaccine to you.
Listen, let me tell you. I mean, I remember a few years ago, I went in to see the doctor, and she said to me, "She's like, oh, she went to run a battery test," and I said something. We talked about prostate exam, and I said, "Well, I don't think I'm ready for that yet." She's like, "You know what? Let's just do it anyway and make sure you're okay." Right? She's a Black woman physician, right? And I have gone to white physicians, and that's not that's not the way they approach it. It's sort of like, okay, we got to do this today, this day, this day. You good? Okay, let's go. You're done. Let's go.
I used to tell my patients all the time, luckily for you, I'm a Black woman too. So I get it.
The other, we'll finish up on this. As we're talking about HBCUs and popular representation, people who are probably of our era remember A Different World.
Yes.
And the college show A Different World, what it did for HBCU college applications and getting kids to think about where they wanted to go to school was just a tremendous benefit that I think we should. I don't know how we redo that in this modern.
I think the vice president is trying to help us out.
And she's appointed Dr. Nunez Smith, who is a brilliant person that's going to help with the disparity of the vaccine and its distribution. So this administration, I think, is on the right track. But if there are any producers out there, you need to see the opportunity of promoting a positive role for dentists. Program, I see it in the works. It's going to air soon.
Well, on this point, I think one of the things that is helpful. I often worry. I spend a lot of time in the tech side of the world, and one of the things that I think we don't do well is when we're talking to young people about these careers. It's like what we're talking to them about is all the work they have to do, how they get past this work. Here's some strategies to deal with the challenges you're going to face. It's like, here's how you eat your vegetables better, right? And I think about what I felt like when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. I just wanted to make some money, hang out with my friends, like have a good time, date. I wanted to do all the things that young people want to do. And I just feel like if we talk to them a little bit more about kind of what the end of the path is, the lifestyle you can live, the work you can do, because people do want to feel some value beyond just their own life. Here's how you can be valuable to your community, and you can go on vacation to the Caribbean or to Greece when you feel like it. Right. Like if we can do those two things, we could probably help solve a lot of this.
Yeah, just recently, I have a 28-year-old daughter, and she was like, "Oh, I'm thinking about going to med school." I was like, "Oh," so I didn't totally turn her off. Sometimes our lives are so hectic and chaotic and busy that a lot of times our children and the people who see us also see the downside, right? Of like, yes, it is a lot of work. I mean, as an OBGYN, I had to be at the hospital at 2:00 in the morning. It was, it was a lot, but even despite all those things, what she saw was that I get to have fun as well. I get to take care of people and live a mission, and I get to, live a nice lifestyle. So to your point, Jamal, yes, we need to show the full breadth that yes, it's a lot of work, but we also get to do nice things.
Absolutely. I have a son that's an oral surgeon in New York and a daughter that's a politician. So
you made it both look good.
And they both wanted to go to and went to HBCUs because they saw how much fun I have at reunions.
That's right.
It's just, they both went to Howard, Hampton, and went to Spelman and Morehouse, and then both have graduate degrees at Howard. So it's great that they have continued along that path.
So let's get back to something a little bit more serious. So when we're talking about the vaccine, and we're talking about COVID, let's not just do the vaccine. So the vaccines are coming online. What's your medical and public policy perspectives on what the world looks like 6 months from now, or a little bit maybe beyond that, in terms of how we're going to live? Are we going to all still be in masks for the rest of our lives, or are we going to see a kind of a sunset on some of these restrictions in our life? I'll start with you, Doc.
Yeah, the mask one is a hard question for me, honestly, because I equate this to the moment around HIV. There was a time with HIV, before HIV, people can't even imagine the way we dealt with blood product and body fluids. If people who are younger now saw what we used to do before HIV, they would think we had lost their mind, like doing surgery with no gloves on, delivering a baby, like nobody cared. Like, so the way that we're going to think about our airspace, right? Like the air that we breathe is going to be fundamentally different, just like the way that we think about bodily fluids because of HIV. It's fundamentally different. That doesn't mean that I think that 6 months from now, everybody will be walking around with masks, but I do think we will all be a lot more aware of our air. What's in the air? What are we breathing? I was just telling my husband last night, we were talking about like, what's Essence Fest look like for us, right? Like, what does it look like? Even when you can go back out, because you've had this moment of now really being more cognizant of what's in your air, how are we going to navigate a space? So I do believe that we will be through this part of the pandemic, and people will be vaccinated, and life will be going somewhat back to normal. But I don't know that the normal will be the same that it's ever, because our lives are very different post HIV than they were pre, and it's hard to see that if you didn't live pre HIV. So if you didn't know how differently, like even the use of condoms, like there's so many things. Young people now couldn't even imagine that people were just out here having sex.
Right.
Because the worst thing you could get is someone you can take a shot for. So, people but when you find you could die, condom use went way. So how we think about our air is just
I have a friend who said, I can't believe we had a birthday party. I can't believe we've just been letting people spit on these cakes. We've been you blowing out candles, right?
Like if somebody starts to blow on a cake, you're like, wait, whoa.
Right. I've been eating these cakes.
One of the few things I agree with Romney about, taking the candle off. But I agree with you, Doc. I mean, to think that I did dentistry for years with no gloves.
Exactly.
I mean, before these diseases were thought about, and I think it's brilliant the way you categorize your airspace. I'd like to see a cultural change. I think the Japanese had it right, bowing. We're going to go to. I think I would love to see just this continue and stop handshaking. That's going to help a ton of diseases.
Exactly.
But so Mayor Price, will we have, will Hampton Homecoming and Howard Homecoming still be these, wall to wall kind of affairs, and we'll be sitting at concerts yelling at the top of our lungs? Is that going to happen?
It will happen, but no time soon. A lot depends on herd, immunity, whether or not enough people get the vaccine. I think mask wearing is going to be continuous for quite some time, and recommended. Just as I said, I've had both shots, but that doesn't mean I still can't pass it on to someone. So I'm going to continue to wear masks and probably for quite some time. I guess the standard is when Fauci puts his down, I'll put mine down. Not till then.
And as you look around, I'm sticking with you for a second, Mr. Mayor. As you look around at your colleagues around the country, who are coming up with different policies, how are you thinking about the policies of your town, and what what's your latitude with the governor? How are you thinking about the policies of your town to keep people safe in the midst of this transition from pre-vaccine to distribute vaccine to post-vaccine?
Yeah, I think the main hurdle right now is schools. Luckily, we have, as a governor, a physician. So, he laid down the law early, and we followed that. But I think getting over this hurdle with schools, we've got teachers and unions fighting against the political policy to get our schools back. because a lot of politicians are looking at the economics of the situation, getting these kids back in school so that the parents can get out to work. Teachers are looking at it. Look, yeah, you know, like my sister who is a teacher and has some health issues. You know, she's not anxious to get back in the classroom because it's going to be risky for her. So there's a balance that we're going to have to create there and make sure that not one of these is dominating the other. So the policy cannot dominate and put people at risk. And yet we can't be too far over to the right, waiting for, you know, to be no risk at all before we get back to educating our kids, because we all know this year, you can just watch this as far as I'm concerned, as far as education. They just need to just reset the SOLs and all the standards of tests that we know our kids are not going to perform well in. One, they didn't have the equipment, they didn't have the hi-fi, the Wi-Fi, they didn't have all that was needed to stay at a level where probably other kids are able to stay. So we're going to really have to look back at this and come up with a balanced policy going forward. And it's up to us as politicians to make those policies fair and equitable.
Yeah, go ahead, Doctor.
I was just going to, so I'll speak for two reasons. One from personal. So I have a fourth grader who I've been virtually schooling, attempting to for the last year, since March of last year, in DCPS, and it has been a mess. I am an OBGYN, not a third and fourth grade teacher.
Right, know your strengths, right?
Exactly. I was like, I may or may not have said, I passed fourth grade already. Do you, boo? I may have said that, maybe not. Anyway, so it's been a long year. So when the opportunity came for him to go back into in-person, he wanted that. He wanted to get back and see his friends. And so I, as a public health person, recognize that I am, that the school, I've trust that the school, that the mayor and that the school administrators are making it safe. And that it's okay for him to go into school. I also know that it's taking some risk. That does not mean that it's 100% safe and that we might all get sick. I have not been vaccinated. My mother has been. So she was the one I was worried about. So it made me feel safer that, okay, the person who I'm the most worried about is vaccinated. Now the rest of us, we might get sick because he's more, he's going to school, but his mental health from being home stuck with us for a year as a 9-year-old and 10-year-old just was starting to decrease. So I love how you put it, Mr. Mayor, the combination of, yes, there's a lot of competing needs. And how do we ensure that we have a balance and strike a balance for going forward, and how it translates to healthcare? I'm on a bunch of committees, way too many. And we're looking at reimagining prenatal care. Jamal, you mentioned you just went through 2. So you probably have done a lot for the last 3 years.
Oh yeah. I know a lot about it.
You know, we make people come in 12 times when they're pregnant. That's a lot of visits. So we're not doing that. So the same thing with in-person school. Reimagining, now that we're doing this, what is the right number? We had not re-looked at prenatal care since 1930. Do you know how much has changed in our understanding of medicine, science, technology since 1930 to say we have to have these visit schedules? So we've just been trying to add in what we know about science and medicine to this schedule without really taking a break and re-looking at the schedule. So that's what we're doing. And that's the same thing I think schools should do, honestly. Like, what would it look like? We had a snow day the other day and they just did it from their computers.
Right.
Their opportunity to invest so that you can do stuff like that. They're just reimagining all of it. I'm like, what would be the possibility to do it?
When you get to reimagining, this is where Dr. Price just started to talk about. Is we've got there all the things outside of just the classroom, right? We've built an entire ecosystem around the choices that we make. I mean, you're talking about Dr. Perry in terms of medicine, and the ecosystem around that is insurance, right? So our doctor made choices for us as we were having our babies that were healthy for my wife, but were not standard care. Right. For the general population, but our doctor felt it was appropriate for her. We fought for a year with the healthcare company about why they should pay for what it is that she described that we should do. Right. So, in Mayor Price, when you talk about it in terms of the schools, we've got to figure out the testing. What are the standards? What's going to happen with these kids? I call it the lost year, because in many ways, I've seen more of my house in the last year than I have of any other physical place. Right. The place that I did not spend that many waking hours in my house when you think about it beforehand. You spend 4 or 5 waking hours in your house a day. Now you're spending 20 waking, or 18 waking hours in your house. So from a public policy perspective, again, Mr. Mayor, you got to think about how do you deal with the ramifications of this healthcare crisis from a public policy perspective to enable families, kids, business owners to function while also keeping people safe?
Absolutely. And, the pressure is great because you get phone calls from industry, restaurants who when the governor sets limits, and then, where is the enforcement? Unfortunately, the enforcement is with the public health department, and they don't have the personnel to enforce those laws. So I get all these calls. Well, I just left a restaurant and there 100 people in there. Nobody has on a mask. You can send the police in as an advisory, but we are not the ones that are responsible for controlling that. And unfortunately, again, disparity, the amount of funding that was given to our health system has been depleted through the years. I'm in with a locality, our health department, our director has 6 localities under one director. That's 500,000 people. There's no way she can manage that. There's no way. So we got to, again, put the resources where the need are. We need to be bumping up our health and local institutions so that these policies that we're implementing have the personnel to make sure that those policies can be done.
Right.
Like vaccination. We don't have the health department does not have the personnel, although everything is to be tunneled through them. Actually, in our area, if the health department would get out of the way, we have the personnel, the facilities, the structure to put jabs in the arms. But if we have to go through this bureaucracy with a waiting list right now of 55,000 people on the internet waiting for a shot, it's tough.
Dr. Perry, let's finish up around this because you're here and you're close to Howard and there are other schools that are in Maryland, UDC. Are these schools going to be helpful? We hear from the president that there's a challenge not just with getting vaccines, but then who's going to distribute the vaccines and get them into people's arms, jabs. It seems like there's a population of people that ought to be available who are on some of these HBCU campuses, whether they're the medical professionals or the students, if they're around, that ought to be helpful in terms of distributing vaccines to people of color in some of these distressed communities.
Yeah, I mean, Mayor McKinley was giving me, Mayor Price was giving me PTSD. So as a previous director of clinical services for a city public health department in New Orleans, after Hurricane Katrina, we had to give tetanus shots. So it's similar but different, right? So 80% of the city floods, everybody's trying to rebuild the city. And so we're trying to figure out how do we get people tetanus because you're rebuilding your house and that's the thing that could kill you, right? So health department gets all this, vials and vials because we can buy it. Then we don't have the manpower, the resource to give it. So we partnered with HBCUs, with the Xaviers, with the Dillards, with the, the SUNO, Southern University of New Orleans, right? So the different HBCUs in the city to make sure that we were getting vaccinations to community. We created a volunteer healthcare workforce where we had retired physicians, retired dentists, retired pharmacists that could come and help and also distribute vaccines. So there is precedent. Public health has done it before, but to the point, it's been so decimated and not invested in. So here you get this big crisis. You got 3 staff. I was in charge of 9 facilities. I had all these staff, and there was nothing. We had 40,000 people still in the city of New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina who had no access to a car to leave if there was in harm's way, if another storm came. So that means not that they owned a car. They didn't even know anybody with a car. Right. So we don't have the resource to get people out of harm's way. That's the kind of jobs that the public health department has to do. And so if you disinvest in them, that's what happens when a storm happens or a pandemic happens. Then magically you're like, oh, well, where's the health department? I'm sitting here with 3 people and the $2 that you gave.
Right. I spent a week in New Orleans after that. We had a volunteer with the Moms Project, and we set up actually in your zoo. Yes, that's where we could leave our equipment out. And I was in charge of that.
We had so the zoo was it was with we had dinner. You one of the dentists that did the yes.
Yeah, I actually went to one of your prisons because we found out there were like 1,500 inmates. They had 1 dental chair, no running water, and these guys are in their swollen jaws. My arm turned blue taking out teeth for a week.
People were lined outside the zoo. That was January after the storm. People were lined, sitting outside the night before, waiting to get access to dentists, waiting to get access to pap smear. We did that all at
Yeah.
the zoo.
So that's a good bridge to the last thing I want to get on. And Mayor Price, I'm going to start with you on this because we just saw what happened in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a climate change reality that we are living through. You are in a community that is got water everywhere,
Yeah.
right? How are you? And that's a public health problem. I mean, you have a climate change event in Newport News. You're sitting on the water. You've got to deal with water tides rising, all these things. How are you thinking about it from a city perspective to compensate or prepare for this coming change when you've got maybe a bunch of people around who think that it's not real, even though we're witnessing these events over and over again?
And that was going to be my first point. First, you got to surround yourself with people who believe in science.
Right.
And then we're having a double whammy because we have water rise plus subsidence. So the land is sinking and the water is rising. And we're pretty much in Norfolk area, the ground zero of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we're implementing new technology. We actually have put in about a $50 million project where we're going to clean water that we can put back into the aquifer, pump it in, so that we will stop the subsidence of the land. While we're trying to put in new codes of building and whatnot, not like Miami, which put in like $400 million to raise their streets 2 feet.
Wow.
You know, they had the resources to do that. I don't know if the federal government is going to be able to do that in areas where we are experiencing this. But we have to make sure that as we plan, and especially in this area, we have the largest naval base in the world, plus the largest shipbuilding with the Newport News shipyard, all in the same area. So we have to make sure that this area is protected from this climate change and make the policies that are going to protect that future from occurring, especially the resources that are needed to make sure that we maintain safe companies that are handling this.
All right, Doc, I guess I'm gonna finish up with you. Is what else should we be thinking about? I mean, we've covered a little bit of, how to get more doctors and how to prepare, what to do with the vaccines. What are we not thinking about that you want to leave us with that we should be thinking about as we, as a community of African-American mayors, HBCU grads, people who are concerned about the future health of Black people?
Well, you started off by introducing me talking about the anti-racism work that I do. And I just feel like thinking about the importance of anti-racism right now for Black people is so important. And understanding that racism is not a feeling or an emotion. It's not someone call you a bad name, that our country was founded on a belief of a hierarchy of human value based upon skin color. And that belief is embedded in all of our policies and the things that we do, how we allocate funds, even in the fact that Miami can raise its streets 2 feet. And Mayor Price is worried about what's going to happen in his community. So to really be actively anti-racist, we have to acknowledge this history and have some truthful conversations in the current situation that we're in, having an insurrection just a few weeks ago, and then also make policies that we can all do together so we can all thrive. So I'm deeply invested in Black communities, Black HBCUs, Black doctors, Black dentists. Dentist is a doctor too, same DDS. Right?
Yes.
Invest in all of that to undo the racism and the harm that's for 500 years been existing.
Well, Doc, it sounds like politics may be in your future. Well stated.
I think I probably got way too many skeletons on there.
Well, if I think I may know your husband.
Andre.
So the two of you guys together, I have a lot of confidence that, in our future, our collective future, if the two of you are on the case.
Well, our son Robeson is really the future. We're just trying to keep him in line so he can take over the world.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you both for being here. Thank you for this robust conversation. I think there's a lot of both a lot of things to be concerned about, but there are some things that are in place and some action items. If we can figure out how to tackle these big questions, we can build a bigger future for your kids and for mine. So hopefully it'll all work out. Thank you, Dr. Price, for being here, and Dr. Creer-Perry. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
All right, I got it.
And I will tell Andre you said hello.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Okay, and thanks to all the other people who are watching.
Thank everybody again too, and our speakers as well as our partners of PepsiCo for hosting this morning's session as well as this one. And I want to thank you, Jamal, for hosting today's event. And I believe this information that we've talked about today is going to be invaluable to our mayors and to the public as a whole. So thank you for a great program once again, and stay safe.
Mhm.